Mine.
It's actually not my job to answer your questions. I've asked you two questions. Should Hamas stay in power and are they a terror group? You're refusing to answer either of them. That is very telling.
TalkTV, it's the only place where you get the truth.
You've done a book on poetry. Poetry and music for the many. I love poetry. We can agree on that.
On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone.
Mr. Rishi Sunak, who had just given the country his 5 big pledges for how he wanted to improve Britain's fortunes. And in that interview, he said, come back in a year's time and tell me how you think I've done.
By the end of the year, when hopefully we can come back and do this again, and you can give me my report card.
So I took him up on his word, and I'm back here at number 10, and I'm about to go inside and tell the Prime Minister exactly how I think he's done. Can you say you have grown the economy? NHS waiting lists, you failed on that pledge. Can I tell you a personal story?
Yeah, that is a shocking story.
I've never understood this Rwanda thing. It seems to me a completely cack-handed policy. Why is this the hill you want to die on?
But you don't have an alternative way to solve that problem.
I'm not Prime Minister. When are you going to call the election? Prime Minister, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Well, it was a year ago. We sat in this very room, in these very chairs. You just had them all done up, actually. It was very nice. And you said to me then, right, I've just done these 5 main pledges. Come back in a year and judge me on how I've done.
I did.
And I'm going to do that. But before we get to the 5 pledges, and thank you for keeping the 6th pledge, which I appreciate, how are you finding it, being Prime Minister? You just become Prime Minister last time. And it was once described to me by someone who'd been Prime Minister that it's, when you first get the job, it's like being in a choppy ocean and you're getting hit by wave after wave after wave. And you think, my God, I'm drowning. And then you start to realise it's always like that. And you start to ride the waves and enjoy it more. Are you finding that?
Well, I think when we were here a year ago, you described it as the worst hospital pass for any incoming Prime Minister ever. And I knew it wasn't going to be easy. And look, candidly, country's been through a lot in the last couple of years. We had COVID and all the impact that had, legacy of backlogs in public services. Then we had a war in Ukraine with all the impact that had on energy bills. So look, there's a lot that happened.
The last time I saw you was a hilarious, by chance moment, mid-air on a plane flying to Los Angeles for what was your only family holiday, I believe, in the last 4.5 years.
Yeah.
I mean, how bad a moment was that when you dusted yourself down, lay back, looked to your right and saw me sitting there?
It was fine. It was fine. I think we had a good chat about cricket, I think, halfway through the fight. No, it's fine. No, actually, and I was excited to be able to, actually, because you say, family's important to me. I don't spend enough time with my kids as a result of the job.
Is it cool to have you as a dad at school? Or is it not very cool?
I think probably not very cool.
I did a brief focus group this morning as I was on my way here. And in fact, when I got here, I asked my builder, Terry, I'm interviewing the Prime Minister, what do you want? He said, cut my bleep taxes. I asked one of my best village mates, he said, tell him to get a grip. And then I asked your policeman on the way in. He said, do something about police wages. So there you are. There's a straw poll.
There's a straw poll.
Which didn't surprise me because everybody, if you ask them, right, what do you want from the Prime Minister? They'll all have a bit of self-interest about it. And we're living in a time when it's difficult, right? It's not easy street out there for almost anybody.
Yeah, I think most fair-minded people recognise that it is difficult. It was difficult when I got the job. But I also think that we're making progress. Well, you know, we are now starting to be able to cut people's taxes. Everyone in their payslip in the last week in January has got the start of a tax cut that's worth 450 quid.
Is it fair to say that right now you will not be able to, in the short term, the next budget, cut the taxes as much as you would have liked to?
Now, I never get into this budget speculation, but the direction of travel is clear. But we've always said we have to do that responsibly, right? And it has to be part of a plan. And we've started that. So the first tax cuts come in, it's meaningful. But if we stick to the plan, then yes, we'd like to cut more taxes.
Are you mindful constantly that your predecessor lasted less than 50 days? In fact, in the end, couldn't survive a lettuce because she decided to just dramatically cut taxes and tank the economy and the pound. Are you constantly reminding yourself you've got to tread carefully here.
Yeah, I mean, we had a debate over it that summer about our approaches, and I can't change the past, but that's really, actually, you talk about that moment, that's why I did this job, because it was that moment in time, country was in a tough spot, and I felt that I could make a difference. I've got an economic background. I think people trust that I know what I'm doing when it comes to the economy, and at that moment, I thought, country's, as I said, in a difficult spot, and I love this country more than anything. It's done an enormous amount for my family, and I can make a difference.
I've interviewed a lot of prime ministers, and I don't for a moment think that you don't have a very difficult job. It's just whether you can persuade people this year, as the clock ticks down to whenever you call that election, whether you can persuade people in that time that you're the guy to lead us out of this or not.
We get to that election, ultimately it's a choice. It's not just about me and what I'm doing, it's about me or Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, and I'd say there, look, the guy's been leader of the opposition for 4 years. He can't tell you what he'd do differently because he doesn't have a plan, and you don't bring about any positive change in our country without a plan.
Who would win a charisma battle between you two?
Look, I'm not interested in that. What I'm interested in is who can bring about.
No, but do you think you're more charismatic?
No, look, other people would judge. But does
it matter to be charismatic?
The battle that I want to win is this, right? The battle I want to win is that people can see that actually who's more likely to bring about that positive change that I want to see, and I want them to realise that actually it's me with a plan that is working, and they can see that. In spite of how difficult things have been, the fact that the plan we put in place is starting to show progress will give them the confidence that I can deliver the change they want. That's the battle that I want to win.
We're here!
Thanks for joining us.
You're with TalkTV, on TV, on radio, online.
And we're on your smart speaker.
Criminals using XL bully dogs as weapons to threaten others.
No matter how well trained, most dog owners will tell you a dog can turn.
Do you know what I love about Talk Today? We do it all. Sunak, Suella, scones. A woman can become a man, and a man can become a woman. And if you think that, you're certifiably insane.
Slick Rishi seemed intelligent, forensic, even a bit of a statesman, the type of man you'd trust to look after your house while you went on holiday.
This concept that actually kids wouldn't carry knives if they could go and play tiddlywinks at the corner of a street or whatever. I think it's a nonsense.
Happy Birds Night.
We slick it, Curan timorous beastie, open up panics in thy breastie.
Keir Starmer's accused the government of failing a generation after a record number of young people were killed last year using a knife or sharp object.
We need to make sure that when we say we're going to ban them, we actually do ban them.
There are so many politicians now who just say, my dad was a Boston. You're David Cameron. No, he wasn't.
It's like brought to you by Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London. Very rarely meet anybody that says, you know, the thing about London is it's got a great mayor, Sadiq Khan, brilliant guy.
In the cities, there are areas where there are no vegetables. It's particularly difficult for those people to do what Mark is saying. If he comes up with this argument again, I'll sit on it.
Stop creating all of these funny little factions with their funny little names. The New Conservatives, the ERG, the Common Sense Research Group, the Red Wall, Red Trouser, Popcorn. I mean, popcorn, what is that?
If you're talking about multiculturalism, it's working class white boys who get put in the army. The poorest people in society are the ones who are going to be put on the front line.
Something is going horribly wrong.
We can do a lot better.
Donald Trump didn't just win, he obliterated. This is a guy facing nearly 100 criminal charges, and yet all that's done is actually make him more popular.
Trump is canny enough to know that all publicity is good publicity.
I don't want a president who's been impeached. If he's able to bamboozle you, that's the way it goes.
I did my 6 months, I came back, nobody would touch me. I put my head down, I persisted, I carried on.
When I say I am God, I'm not joking.
Did you feel Elvis was controlling?
I've been answering your question, you answer mine.
It's actually not my job to answer your questions. I've asked you two questions. Should Hamas stay in power, and are they a terror group? You're refusing to answer either of them. That is very telling.
Talk TV. It's the only place where you get the truth.
You've done a book on poetry. Poetry and music for the many. I love poetry. We can agree on. We've had two British politicians murdered in the last 8 years or so. And we've just had your Justice Minister, Mike Freer, saying he's going to quit Parliament at the next election after a series of death threats from Islamist extremists and an arson attack on his constituency office. And he said that he escaped being killed by David Amos's killer by the skin of his teeth because he happened to not be in his constituency when that killer was looking at his office. But you have, obviously, I presume, a lot of threats, but you have a lot of security that deals with it. That goes with the job, as it does in many of the offices of state. But the average MP doesn't have that. And it just struck me, is it not time, and is it in your gift to do this, to actually give every single member of parliament on both sides, all parties, a bodyguard, a security guard? I think the public would support that. I don't want to see more elected officials murdered.
No, of course, no one wants to see that. And actually I was speaking to Mike, and it's awful what he's had to endure, his office essentially being attacked and set on fire, the threats he's received. And now actually Houses of Parliament have put in place over the years more things to protect MPs, security in their offices, at their homes, and it's something that's constantly being reviewed. But I think as well as looking at that, which you're right, of course we should do, which are the practical things, we've also got to look at the ideology that is driving that kind of behaviour, and that's making sure that we tackle it at its root, right? What we can't have is that kind of extremist ideology festering in communities, on our streets, that leads people to behave in that particular way. And I think that's equally important.
Do you think the idea of each of them having a security guard is a good idea?
No, well, generally these are better answers that are, well, questions that are better put to the police and our security services. I mean, look, there may well be an argument for that.
It seems to me they're very vulnerable in their constituency offices. Every MP.
And more protection has been put in place at most MPs' constituency offices where they have access to alarm systems and
would it be right
to
assume you're looking at this?
In general, as I was talking to Mike and talking to others, we always want to make sure that MPs are safe. And as you said, it's incredibly sad what we've seen. But as well as the practical security of MPs, which is paramount, it's the culture that leads to that type of extremist behaviour. That doesn't just impact MPs, it impacts other people as well. And we've got to be equally tough on calling out that kind of behaviour as well.
Do you get told about threats to you?
I mean, yes.
Is it unnerving?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm very fortunate in the sense I have an incredible team of people whose job it is to keep me safe, and it comes with the territory. People remember, people came and protested at my house, which was obviously slightly unsaid. Actually, I think that happened literally while I was on my way over to the States with you on the plane. That was happening, and that is unnerving because when your home is invaded in that way, you feel very vulnerable. But it isn't just about me. It actually goes to a broader thing. I want my two girls to be able to grow up in a society that's safe, which is why I'm quite focused on putting more police officers on the street, crucially giving them the tough powers they need to, say, confiscate knives off people, which is really important. Make sure we have things like CCTV and street lighting, so girls like mine, when they grow up, and women can feel safe when they walk home at night. Like that's the type of society that I want, the type of country that we should have.
People feel concerned when they see these pro-Palestinian marches, many of whom are marching completely peacefully and for all the right reasons, and should be respected. But there are plenty of people brazenly flouting the laws, supporting Hamas, chanting jihad, chanting from the river to the sea. And I think people feel that more should be done to stop that. That if more is not done, then it fuels that kind of extremism and emboldens them.
Yeah, which is completely wrong. And some of the scenes that we've seen are unacceptable. I mean, the rise of anti-Semitism in particular over the last few months is appalling. I mean, in our country, in this age...
Jewish people feel genuinely
afraid. My friends, your friends, when their kids are not wearing their school uniform, right? When they're hiding their Star of Davids. I mean, this is...
What do you feel about that?
Yeah, I feel shocked to my core that in our country, in this age, that has happened, that people feel that they have to hide their identity. It's obviously appalling. So what are we doing? Well, we're giving more funding to the organisation that protects Jewish places of faith, for example, and others, and we're talking to the police about whether extra powers are needed to properly police these protests. So that is a conversation where I've been very clear. If we think that there are new powers that they need in order to effectively deal with some of the things that we're all seeing, then we are very open to doing that and legislating and bringing forward quite tough things. But right now, if there is someone that's breaking the law, I've been very clear with all the police, those people should face the full force of the law. There should be absolutely, no tolerance for this. And when people are doing things that we can all see with our own eyes, or people sharing videos, the police should be going after those people and getting them locked up.
I interviewed an NHS doctor of more than 20 years, Wahid Shader, who also had a name, Abdul Wahid. He was the leader of the Islamist group Hizb ut-Tahrir Britain. And he'd been an NHS doctor the entire time that he was also running this group. You've just, as a government, prescribed them as a terror group. He is still registered with the General Medical Council. I mean, what should happen?
So I think my understanding is actually that the NHS are looking into all of that.
He's been suspended.
Yeah, so I think they're looking into that, and obviously professional bodies independent from the government. We've been very clear about Hizb ut-Tahrir. They should be a prescribed terrorist organisation. We're bringing forward the legislation to do that. And again, question for Keir Starmer, he, once upon a time, represented Hizb ut-Tahrir. Actually, he supported them in resisting prescription elsewhere, and that's who he was on the side of. We're busy trying to ban these people, and he was busy trying to.
Do you think he's a terrorist sympathiser?
Well, I said the facts speak for themselves, right? Like he was their lawyer when they were trying to resist this. We've just prescribed them because we think that's what they are. And I just speak again. These things speak to people's values, right?
But as a general principle, you shouldn't be able to continue as an NHS doctor if you are leading this group in this country.
Yeah, well, from this moment on, remember these things are forward-looking, but there's clearly questions to answer which the NHS are rightly looking at.
Because he came on my show and he was so brazen.
Yeah.
I mean, really brazen. Well, he celebrated October the 7th.
Yeah.
He felt it was resistance.
Punch
in the face.
It's not obviously right for me to comment on individual people, but let me just be clear. Forget about working in a particular place. It is illegal.
Right.
For a prescribed terrorist organisation, for someone to be glorifying that organisation and what they do is already illegal under our law. And that's the same in these protests. When you see people glorifying what Hamas have done, that is against the law.
I felt, like I know you did, that October the 7th was one of the most horrendous terror attacks of modern times, and that Israel not only has a duty to defend itself, but has a moral compulsion to protect its people, right? I think we would feel the same way here. The big question is whether what they've been doing since is proportionate. In your estimation, is it proportionate, given the massive civilian death toll, and in particular, the number of children and women being killed?
Yeah, so actually where you first started is a place that I start. Imagine if that had happened here, right? Over 1,000 people, women, children, slaughtered, raped, all of this. Absolutely appalling act of terrorism. And I think Israel, as any country would, has not just the right, but the duty to defend itself and its people and make sure that that doesn't ever happen again, and that means going after Hamas. And I think, as I said, it's not just a right, I think that's a duty that anyone would expect of their own government if something like that happened to them. But it is also incumbent on Israel to take every care to avoid harming civilians. And I've made that point repeatedly to Prime Minister Netanyahu. And I'm concerned about the loss of civilian life in Gaza. Too many civilians have lost their lives, and there are people who are in desperate straits from a humanitarian perspective, which is why we've been trying very hard to get more aid into Gaza. Again, I've kept pushing the Prime Minister to open up more aid routes. The UK is doing a lot.
Should there be a ceasefire now?
We've been very clear that we think there should be an immediate pause to get hostages out, because remember, Hamas still are holding many hostages. So I think there should be an immediate pause to get hostages out, to get more aid in, and build the conditions for a sustainable ceasefire. But for it to be sustainable and truly sustainable, we have to address the situation of Hamas. We can't have a terrorist organisation still in charge. We can't have them able to fire rockets into Israel. So as part of a sustainable ceasefire, those things need to be addressed. But look, in the immediacy, do I want a pause to get hostages out and aid in? Yes, we do, and that's what we've been calling for.
I mean, 10,000 children in Gaza have been killed. 19,000 more have been orphaned. 65% or so of Gaza has been flattened. I mean, what is going on is devastating. Have you considered, I mean, you're in a moral quandary, as I've been, about the scale of this response and where that limit should be before countries like ours say enough?
Whilst I support and we support Israel's right to defend itself and remove the threat that Hamas poses to its people, because we have to start there in all cases. Imagine if that had happened in our country, what people would rightly expect of the government. They have to do that in a way that avoids best as possible harming civilians, and too many have lost their lives.
Do you think
and not enough aid is getting in.
Is it helpful that Prime Minister Netanyahu continues in his job?
Look, it's never appropriate for me to comment on other countries' domestic politics, right? But what we will do continually is call on Israel to allow more aid into Gaza to help all the people, as you said, children who are not getting the medicine, the food that they need. And we're playing a leading role in that, and people should be proud. We've tripled the amount of aid into the region. Recently, when I spoke to Prime Minister Netanyahu, I said, well, why can't we open up another aid route? So we're not reliant on going through Egypt.
Does he want to hear anyone who doesn't just go along with what he wants to do?
Yeah, I mean,
because he seems very blinkered in what he's now doing.
Actually, we've managed over time to increase the number of trucks which are going into Gaza. It's still not enough, but compared to where we were at the beginning, we have persuaded him to open up the crossing, to get hundreds of trucks in, but we need hundreds more. So look, there is progress that has been made, but it's nowhere near enough. And I will keep pushing so that we can get the support that we need to people in Gaza. And at the same time, work, as you were talking about, work for that sustainable ceasefire.
Your Foreign Secretary, Lord Cameron, has signalled what appears to be quite a shift in UK policy this week when he said that the political perspective of a credible route to a Palestinian state and a new future must be given to the Palestinians. It needs to be irreversible. It's not entirely in our gift, but Britain and our partners can help by confirming our commitment to a sovereign, viable Palestinian state and our vision for its composition. And crucially, must state our clear intention to grant it recognition, including at the United Nations. That does seem to be a move in our policy as a country.
No, look, our position is the same. And as David was saying, we are committed to a two-state solution, right? We absolutely are committed. That's been the long-standing position of the UK government. And actually what's happened over the last few months has reminded us that we need to redouble our efforts to bring that about, working with all our partners in the region. I went very soon after the attacks to meet with everyone in the region to talk about this, and we're playing a role. I met with the president of the Palestinian Authority specifically to talk about this. But we have to think about that in the context of what's going on right now, and that's why the immediate primacy is to get aid in, get hostages out, build the conditions for a sustainable
But would you
ceasefire.
countenance, if you were Prime Minister, actually saying that we now consider there's a Palestinian state before a conclusion to a peace process?
And that's where I think that there has been no change.
That's the way people
and that's
have
not,
perceived his comments to be taking.
And that's not the government's long-standing position has been that we will recognise a Palestinian state at the time that it's most conducive to the peace process.
So only once the process is finished.
Yeah, I think it's hard.
You wouldn't preempt.
It's hard to
the
speculate.
conclusion of that. Yeah. But it's a difference.
Yeah, and I think it's been I think it's been overinterpreted. Like, what we are absolutely committed to is a two-state solution. The recognition of Palestine should come at a point when that is most conducive to the overall process. But at the moment...
But you're not looking to preempt anything?
No, at the moment what we're looking to do is build the conditions to get hostages out, aid in a sustainable ceasefire that looks forward to the future that the Foreign Secretary talked about, where Israelis and Palestinians can live side by side, both with dignity, with peace, with security and opportunity.
When you look at the resolution of the troubles in Northern Ireland, and it's very encouraging that we're looking to see the power sharing executive is now going to be back up and running, and congratulations on that. It's a significant achievement. But do you see parallels between Northern Ireland and Israel-Palestine? For many decades, it looked like there could be no resolution in Northern Ireland, and then there was. But do you think that we can achieve the same in the Middle East?
I'm obviously newer to this, but Northern Ireland is closer to home, and important to me is the UK Prime Minister. And I am pleased that we have been able to resolve the situation in Northern Ireland, because fundamentally, there's millions of people who have been without a government for too long. There is now the very real prospect of the executive being back up and running in Northern Ireland, people having the devolved government that they deserve and need to address all the things that are going on, and that is really positive. And I've learned through that process more about the necessity of sitting down and talking to people, working through problems. It shows that when we can take on big problems, we can fix them. And that's my takeaway from the experience in Northern Ireland. And actually, I'm confident that that can be done elsewhere as well.
We're here.
Thanks for joining us.
You're with TalkTV, on TV, on radio, online.
And we're on your smart speaker.
criminals using XL bully dogs as weapons to threaten others.
No matter how well trained, most dog owners will tell you a dog can turn.
Do you know what I love about Talk Today? We do it all. Sunak, Suella, scones. A woman can become a man and a man can become a woman. And if you think that, you're certifiably insane.
Slick Rishi seemed intelligent, forensic, even a bit of a statesman, the type of man you'd trust to look after your house while you went on holiday.
This concept that actually kids wouldn't carry knives if they could go and play tiddlywinks at the corner of a street or whatever. I think it's a nonsense.
Happy Birds Night.
We slick it, Curan timorous beastie, open up panics in thy breastie.
Keir Starmer's accused the government of failing a generation after a record number of young people were killed last year using a knife or sharp object.
We need to make sure that when we say we're going to ban them, we actually do ban them.
There are so many politicians now who just say my dad was a Boston. You're David Cameron. No, he wasn't.
It's like brought to you by Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London. Very rarely meet anybody that says, the thing about London is it's got a great mayor, Sadiq Khan, brilliant guy.
In the cities, there are areas where there are no vegetables. It's particularly difficult for those people to do what Mark is saying. If he comes up with this argument again, I'll sit on it.
Stop creating all of these funny little factions with their funny little names. The New Conservatives, the ERG, the Common Sense Research Group, the Red Wall, Red Trouser, Popcorn. I mean, popcorn, what is that?
If you're talking about multiculturalism, it's working class white boys who get put in the army. The poorest people in society are the ones who are going to be put on the front line.
Something is going horribly wrong.
We can do a lot better.
Donald Trump didn't just win, he obliterated. This is a guy facing nearly 100 criminal charges, and yet all that's done is actually make him more popular.
Trump is canny enough to know that all publicity is good publicity.
I don't want a president who's been impeached. If he's able to bamboozle you, that's the way it goes.
I did my 6 months, I came back, nobody would touch me. I put my head down, I persisted, I carried on.
When I say I am God, I'm not joking.
Did you feel Elvis was controlling?
I've been answering your question, you answer mine.
It's actually not my job to answer your questions. I've asked you two questions. Should Hamas stay in power and are they a terror group? You're refusing to answer either of them. That is very telling.
TalkTV, it's the only place where you get the truth.
You've done a book on poetry. Poetry and music for the many. I love poetry. We can agree on that.
This is TalkTV.
You've been very strong in supporting Ukraine, which I've been pleased to see. I think it's the right thing for our country to be doing. Do you fear that the support in America, which is going to be critical, may be drifting the wrong way?
So when I was in the States last year, I spent a lot of time on the Hill talking to people from both parties in Congress, and I didn't detect that. I think there is actually broad bipartisan support in the US for more support to Ukraine. I think what people unsurprisingly want to see, given that the US is by far and away the single biggest provider of that support, is they want to see other allies stepping up. Now, if I was a US taxpayer, if I was a US politician, I'd probably say the same thing. Hang on, we're going to do this. What about everyone else? And that's why it was important to me that the UK demonstrated leadership. I was the first foreign leader there this year. It was my first visit. We were the first people to announce significant support for this year, first country to sign a multi-year
I think what you've been doing in Ukraine is great.
But that will help actually make the argument in America that they can count on us as an ally, so they're not shouldering the entire burden themselves.
If Russia was to turn its turrets in our direction, is this country prepared properly to defend itself?
Yes. And my first job is to keep everybody safe. And unfortunately, the world is becoming less safe. And we can see that obviously with the situation in Russia and Ukraine. But most recently, we've been seeing it in the Red Sea, where for the first time in decades, people are trying to fire missiles at one of our Royal Navy vessels. They're disrupting shipping. And that is actually, we can't pretend these things don't affect us, because every ship that has to get rerouted ultimately adds more cost to the things that people are buying every day. And we've all just lived through the impact of that because of our energy bills. So I actually, oddly, by coincidence, was in Ukraine at the same time as that we were participating with the US on self-defense strikes against the Houthi group. And that kind of demonstrates the world we're living in. But that's why we've increased our investment in defence spending, and it's something that I spend
many
more
in
of my
the
time
armed
on.
forces, and I've got, listen, my brother is a retired Army Colonel, my sister married a guy who's now retired, he was an Army Colonel. A lot of concern about the actual numbers we have in our armed forces. Are you concerned we don't have enough?
So look, my job is to put the right investment in, which we've done. I did that first of all as Chancellor, where we put the largest increase of funding into the MOD since the end of the Cold War, and we've committed to maintain that and increasing it over time. But in general, do I think we are well protected, well invested? Yes. We are the second biggest defence spender in NATO. We have been for a decade.
What's your message to Putin?
I mean, as you can see from what we've done in Ukraine, like, we will stand up for the things that we believe in. We won't let aggression go unchecked and unpunished. And actually, what he can see is that we have come together with our allies. That we are not divided. What he has served to do is unite everybody, increase the amount that we're all spending in defence. We've got new members of NATO. So actually, strategically, this has already been a failure for him because he has not achieved any of those objectives. And we're in a much stronger position now to resist further aggression from him and others around the world that would seek to do likewise.
Let's turn to the pledges. That was the warm-up. You made 5 pledges in your January 2023 speech. You said, these are the people's priorities. They are your government's priorities. We will either have achieved them or not. No tricks, no ambiguity. Rather, delivering for you or we're not. We will rebuild trust in politics through action or not at all. So I ask you to judge us on the effort we put in and the results we achieve. I will only promise what I can deliver, and I will deliver what I promise. I mean, it was a big statement. You know, I thought it was ballsy, if I'm honest with you, for a politician who's just become Prime Minister to say that and then to specify 5 criteria. How many of the 5 do you think you've met?
Well, I think we've made good progress on all of them, and we should go through.
How many have you met?
We should go through because...
Yeah, we're going to. I just wonder, in totality, out of the 5...
I think we've made...
When you're scoreboarding yourself, what do you think?
I think we've made good progress on the economic ones, which are the first 3, to halve inflation, grow the economy and reduce debt. We have not made progress on cutting waiting lists, which we'll get into, and we have made progress on stopping the boats, but there is more to do, and we'll get onto that as well. But I should take a step back before we get into it. You said it was ballsy and surprising. But that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to do something different in the sense that I wanted to be a different type of politician. And I wanted to say, look, you can hold me accountable for things. I'm not going to obfuscate. None of this was easy. And I wanted to be held accountable for them. As I said, you come back in a year, here we are.
Well, the reason I thought it was ballsy was I knew that you would be judged now as you're in an election year. And if you didn't deliver on those 5 pledges, then the electorate might take a rather dim view of it, given the pronouncement you made back in January 23.
And I think, actually, as we were talking right at the beginning, I think people are completely fair-minded. They will judge us on the effort we're putting in, the results we're achieving, and they'll make their determination about the future, actually, about who's going to keep delivering change that they want to see. I think.
Well, let me put my teacher hat on.
Yep, let's go through it.
Let's go through the report.
Yeah.
Mr. Sunak. Well, the first one was to halve inflation by the end of 2023. You did it. Now, most people thought you probably would. And here's my question for you. Do you want to actually take credit for halving inflation? Because I don't remember you taking any blame on the way up as it soared to 11%. Is it really not the case that it's mostly out of your control, inflation? So, yes, it's great that you've met your pledge, but how much of that is down to you?
Look, well, all of these things, there's always a mix of factors, but that was the most important thing for me to focus on when I got this job. The cost of living dominated everything. It's the biggest impact on families up and down the country. And I said we needed to halve inflation because that's the best thing we could do to help everyone. And I'm pleased that we've more than delivered it, as you said, from 11% down to 4%.
Yeah.
And all I'd say is there was a big period in the middle where it wasn't obvious that we were going to hit it, and I could find lots of journalists commentating and saying that that's not going to happen. So I don't.
But how much do you think was down to you?
I do, because I don't think these things happen by accident. I don't think these things happen by accident. It was not a foregone conclusion. It requires governments to take difficult decisions. And there'll be other things that people have wanted me to do, spend money on this, borrow that, where I've said, no, that's not the right thing to do, because we've got to get inflation down.
But if you want the credit for getting it down to 4%, should I be blaming you for it getting up to 11 to start with?
You people no doubt were.
Yeah, but would it be right to?
I mean, look, there will be a mix of factors in all of it. It's not that simple. When you're talking about the economy, there's obviously a mix of factors, but all I can do is control the things that I'm responsible for, and principally for a government, when it comes to inflation, that's about how much are we borrowing and spending. And if you borrow too much as a government, that adds to inflation. That's relatively straightforward. And unfortunately, right, it's easy for governments to do borrowing because that's taking the easy way out. Then they don't have to say no to anybody. So I had to spend a lot of last year making some difficult decisions that weren't easy, but that's what I want to deliver for the country is what's right in the long term. And we've
first
got that
pledge,
down.
tick.
Right.
You're 1 for 1. It's a good start. Second one, grow the economy. I would categorise you as being right on the wire on this, pending the news you're going to get in 2 weeks, which will establish whether the fourth quarter was positive or negative. And if it was negative, that would be 2 successive quarters of negative. We would officially be in recession. That's going to be a big figure for you, 15th of February, isn't it?
Yes, that is.
And all the indications are, it may not be good news. So if it's not good news, and we are officially tipping into recession, would you accept that that has failed?
So again, when I got the job, what were people predicting? They were predicting almost a year-long recession where the economy would shrink by 1.5%. That was what was forecast when I got this job by the independent forecasters. That clearly hasn't happened. Now, you're right, we're on the wire of has it grown a little bit, has it broadly stayed flat, but fundamentally what was predicted was a year-long recession where the economy shrank by quite a lot. That has not happened, and we've outperformed countries, and we've outperformed European countries like Germany and others.
Can you say, as we sit here, you have grown the economy?
Yeah, I'm confident.
Since we last say it.
Yeah, I'm confident that we will be able to keep growing the economy.
I didn't say will be able to. I mean, have you actually grown it, do you think?
I think relative to what was predicted, we definitely have grown it.
You're being a politician now.
No, but that is, I think context is important.
You want to be a straight talker. A politician would say, well, compared to what could have happened, but actually...
But I think it's both. I think they're both important.
But if you want to be judged specifically on the pledge, would it not be honest to say, well, we haven't grown the economy, but we're hoping to?
We don't know, is the answer, because as you said, we'll find out in a couple of weeks. But, as I said, we'll see what it is, right? But fundamentally, also worth bearing in mind the context. And that's why people can make their own judgment, right? We were forecast to have a really bad time and a big, long recession. And we're now talking about, we've certainly avoided that. And then how much has it grown or has it stayed broadly
I'm not going to
still?
give you a yes. I'm not going to give you a no yet, because it might surprise us in 2 weeks. But it's a big moment for you in 2 weeks.
Yes, but again...
You don't want to be the Prime Minister after saying you're going to grow the economy to wake up and discover that technically we went into recession.
But again, it doesn't stop there, does it?
No.
It's about what else is happening. And if you think about
You'd
some of the
rather
other
avoid
things,
that.
Of course you'd always rather avoid it. But it's important to look at other things as well. Real wages are growing, so people's wages are growing faster than prices for 6 months in a row. Our manufacturing sector last year overtook France's in the size of how big it is. We have more big technology companies grown in the UK than France, Germany and Sweden combined. And we're getting new investment in from people like Nissan into Sunderland, Ørsted are building an offshore wind farm off the East Coast, Microsoft are doubling their footprint in the UK. So actually, I think the momentum on the economy is very positive.
To be fair, though, I can't give you a yes yet.
Well, I think actually, we'll see where we get there in a couple of weeks.
All right.
But remember, it doesn't just stop there. We can't just give up there. We need to keep
leave it
growing.
as a possibly.
As a possibly. With a bias to the positive compared to where we were.
Number 3, reducing the national debt. I think we have to agree that that has not happened.
Yeah, but we were always clear about...
But you agree that?
No. I was very clear when I did that press conference. We always measure these things according to these independently measured fiscal rules. Right, we have rules that we set out for what's happening to debt.
But the public sector net debt was 97.7% of GDP in December 2023. It was 94.8% in January 2023. That is not going down. That's going up.
It is absolutely according to the rules that are independently checked by the Office for Budget Responsibility, forecast to decline within our rules.
I know, but you're... okay. But you're talking about going forward.
Yeah, but that is how we measure debt. And I was very transparent about that at the time.
But your actual pledge said we will make sure our national debt is falling so we can secure the future of public services. Now, are you saying you didn't mean in the next year?
We were crystal clear at the time I was crystal clear. No, because this is not me marking my own homework. We have an independent body that marks our homework.
You did jump ahead of yourself and said in November, you publicly said it was falling and you had to be corrected. And you were warned, be careful about statistics if you're Prime Minister.
But on this, I'm very confident.
You accept you were wrong to do that?
No, because what I'm referring to very clearly is the rules that we have set out that are independently checked. Someone else marks our homework, the Office of Budget Responsibility, and they have been clear.
If I'm marking your homework.
But they've been very clear that we're meeting those
fiscal rules. But I'm marking your homework, and right now I can't give you a success.
Oh, no, you can.
Not for this year.
Yes,
Not
you
since
can.
I last saw you.
Yeah, you can.
You could say looking ahead.
Yeah, but that's always how we measure debt, that it's on a downward trajectory. That's how you build certainty and security for public finances. That's the fiscal rules that the Chancellor set out. Before I even gave that speech, we'd set out the fiscal rules.
We're going to disagree about this, but...
No, you have to...
Well, I don't accept you certainly haven't cut it in the first year.
No, but it's the rules that we set out. No, the rules that we set out have been completely and utterly met.
Okay.
Every time the Chancellor has stood up, the independent body has said, yes, you're meeting our rules. It's massively on track to happen.
Okay.
And it's got even better.
We're here.
Thanks for joining us.
You're with Talk TV, on TV, on radio, online.
And we're on your smart speaker.
Criminals using XL bully dogs as weapons to threaten others.
No matter how well trained, most dog owners will tell you a dog can turn.
Do you know what I love about Talk today? We do it all. Sunak, Suella, scones. A woman can become a man and a man can become a woman. And if you think that, you're certifiably insane.
Slick Rishi seemed intelligent, forensic, even a bit of a statesman, the type of man you'd trust to look after your house while you went on holiday.
This concept that actually kids wouldn't carry knives if they could go and play tiddlywinks at the corner of a street or whatever. I think it's a nonsense.
Happy Birds Night.
We slick it, Curan timorous beastie, open up panics in thy breastie.
Keir Starmer's accused the government of failing a generation after a record number of young people were killed last year using a knife or sharp object.
We need to make sure that when we say we're going to ban them, we actually do ban them.
There are so many politicians now who just say my dad was a Boston. You're David Cameron. No, he wasn't.
It's like brought to you by Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London. Very rarely meet anybody that says, the thing about London is it's got a great mayor, Sadiq Khan, brilliant guy.
In the cities, there are areas where there are no vegetables. It's particularly difficult for those people to do what Mark is saying. If he comes up with this argument again, I'll sit on it.
Stop creating all of these funny little factions with their funny little names. The New Conservatives, the ERG, the Common Sense Research Group, the Red Wall, Red Trouser, Popcorn. I mean, popcorn, what is that?
If you're talking about multiculturalism, it's working class white boys who get put in the army. The poorest people in society are the ones who are going to be put on the front line.
Something is going horribly wrong.
We can do a lot better.
Donald Trump didn't just win, he obliterated. This is a guy facing nearly 100 criminal charges, and yet all that's done is actually make him more popular.
Trump is canny enough to know that all publicity is good publicity.
I don't want a president who's been impeached. If he's able to bamboozle you, that's the way it goes.
I did my 6 months, I came back, nobody would touch me. I put my head down, I persisted, I carried on.
When I say I am God, I'm not joking.
Did you feel Elvis was controlling?
I've been answering your question, you answer mine.
It's actually not my job to answer your questions. I've asked you two questions. Should Hamas stay in power and are they a terror group? You're refusing to answer either of them. That is very telling.
Talk TV. It's the only place where you get the truth.
You've done a book on poetry. Poetry and music for the many. I love poetry. We can agree on that. NHS waiting list.
We have not made enough progress.
You failed on that pledge.
Yes.
Because you said NHS waiting lists will fall. In fact, they are slightly coming down now, but the waiting list is still nearly 500,000 more than it was at the start of last year. You accept that?
Yes, and we all know the reasons for that. What I would say to people is, look, we've invested record amounts in the NHS, more doctors, more nurses, more scanners. All these things mean that the NHS is doing more today than it ever has been, but industrial action has had an impact. And in November, you talked about this, in November we had a month where there was no strikes for the first time.
Yeah.
And do you know what happened to the waiting list? They fell by almost 100,000.
I mean, impartial observers have calculated probably half of that waiting list can be ascribed to the strikes.
But so you had 1 month where we had no
in other
strikes.
words, they would sort of gone up, but they wouldn't have gone up as fast.
Yeah, we had a month in November, no strikes. What happened? Waiting list fell by 100,000.
You said in your January 2023 speech, I know there are challenges in A&E. People are understandably anxious when they see ambulances queuing outside hospitals. You should know we're taking urgent action. And going back to your Foreign Secretary, when he was Prime Minister in 2011, I refuse to go back to the days when people had to wait for hours on end to be seen in A&E, and so on. We will ensure we get control back of waiting times. And yet, a new statistic that came out yesterday says nearly 35,000 patients a month waited for 12 hours or more for a hospital bed in 2023. That's a fact-check analysis of NHS England data. It's 3,000 times higher than in 2011, after 14 years of Tory rule. That's not a good thing.
No, that's not good enough. And that's why we've been working very hard to bring down the people waiting for A&E treatment.
Can I tell you a personal story at this stage? Because I found it quite shocking. So my mother is 79 and she had a heart attack 3 months ago. And she was taken to a local hospital. They said, you've had a heart attack, we've got to get you to a cardiac unit down in Brighton on the Sussex coast. And they blew her in an ambulance at midnight. Fortunately, my sister was able to go with them. And she was seen when she got there, and then she was put on a trolley in A&E, in a corridor, for nearly 7 hours. The heart monitor battery ran out. Nobody fixed it. At one stage, no nurse came for 3 or 4 hours. There were between, she reckons, 35 and 40 other people on trolleys in the corridors of this A&E, most of them elderly without people. She said old men were begging for bottles to urinate into. Others were crying in pain or discomfort. She said it was a scene out of a war zone, and she couldn't believe what she was seeing. And she was also terrified, of course, having been told you've had a heart attack, that no one was putting her into the unit and actually trying to fix her. Now, once she got up there, the treatment she got was world class. She was fixed within 36 hours. But I brought this one picture to show you. That's my mum, who's worked all her life, right? Paid her taxes all her life. And when she really needed the NHS, eventually the NHS came through. But she could have died on that trolley. And I think that's shocking.
Yeah, that is a shocking story. And I'm really glad that she's feeling better now, and send her my best. And I'm glad she got the treatment that she needed.
This was a Monday night, Prime Minister. This wasn't even a weekend.
Yeah.
And it's not even a major city. This is Brighton. Yeah. And there were 40-odd people on trolleys in a corridor. I mean, I found that just, how can this be happening?
Yeah, it's not good enough, the performance in A&E and ambulance waiting times.
Has the Tory government since 2010, has it failed on NHS? Do you accept that?
No, I don't, because I think we also are dealing with the backlog and the legacy of COVID, which has just had an impact, and we can't escape that, right? When you shut down the country and the NHS for the best part of 2 years, that has had an impact on everything since then. And we just have to recognise that reality. Now, what we can do is put more money in, which we are, hire more people, which we are, put more diagnostic treatment in to get people the tests and the checks and the scans they need quicker. And ultimately, the NHS is doing more today than it's ever done in the past. And as we saw in November, it made a difference on the waiting list. Ambulance times this winter, A&E times this winter are better than they were when I first got this job. So that shows that we're making progress. But fundamentally, is it good enough? No. But we are making a difference to people. Just this week, for example, in a different way, we've made it easier for people to get medicines that they need for things like sore throats, ear infections, where now they can go and see their pharmacist.
Well, I think that's a very good initiative.
Yeah, and you think...
But I do think you've got to, as a government, sort this problem out of A&Es. The number of horror stories I heard once we started telling people about what happened to my mother was really shocking. Almost everyone that had to go into an A&E had a similar horror story. And I don't blame the staff. They completely rushed off their feet. And as I say, once you get up into the place you're supposed to be, the treatment's amazing. We have an amazing health service. It's just getting up there is hell.
Yeah, and we don't have enough doctors or nurses that we train here at home. So one of the other things I decided to do as Prime Minister was, for the first time in the NHS's 75 years, actually have a long-term workforce plan. So now We've just started training more doctors, more nurses, more dentists, more of everything, so that over time we will be less reliant on people needing to come here from abroad, and we'll have more doctors and nurses in all our hospitals. Now that will obviously take time to make an impact, but it's an example of me doing what I think is right in the long term. No one's ever done that before, because generally they don't think they'll be around to see the benefits of it.
Right, I think that's been part of the problem.
Yeah, but I've made the decision to do it.
One thing you said to me last time we spoke was you were going to sort or look at, you said, the car parking for NHS staff issue. It's now completely out of control. It's risen by 50% in a year, the price of parking a car at hospitals in England. Nearly £50 million is paid by NHS staff to have the privilege to park in hospitals where they're saving lives. I think it's unconscionable.
So after we spoke last time, I went back and looked into it, and I'm actually able to report that we have now rolled out across all NHS trusts the free parking policy, which is focused on those who need it the most. So people, for example, blue badge holders, so those with disabilities, people who have multiple outpatient appointments because of their condition, parents who have got sick children who need to stay overnight, and all NHS staff who are working night shifts.
Why should any member of NHS staff pay?
Well, all of the people that
why should any
I've
of
just
them pay?
mentioned.
No, but why should any of them pay?
Why should any of them pay?
Why should any NHS staff pay for the privilege
well, lots of people get
of
to
saving
work in
people's
different.
lives?
Well, lots of people get to work in different ways, right? So those are all the people that we have targeted free parking on. I think most people would agree those are the most at-need groups. And when it comes to nurses, as you mentioned, actually what we arranged this year is for nurses to have a very good pay rise. So a nurse that was.
So they can spend it on parking.
Well, I'm just making sure. But remember, everyone comes.
I think it's a no-brainer. If you want to be popular with the health service, Prime Minister, don't make them pay for the privilege of parking in.
Well, what they wanted when they spoke to us and making sure that their staff were paid well,
Okay.
and actually, look, a typical nurse with 5 years' experience, they got pay rise of around £1,700. They got an extra bonus of around £2,000, and just this year they're receiving a tax cut worth around £450.
Will you take another look at it?
I will always look to see how we can support our staff, because I agree with you, they do an incredible job, and we're very lucky to have them.
So fail on NHS waiting list. Fifth, stop the boats. You said we will pass new laws to stop small boats, making sure if you come to this country illegally, you are detained and swiftly removed. Now, on the plus side, you've reduced the number of people last year who came over on the boats from 45,000 down to 29,000, mainly due to the deal with Albania. Big tick. I mean, that's a big drop. Congratulations. Here's the bit I don't get. I've never understood this Rwanda thing from the start of it, during it, and where we are now. It seems to me a completely cack-handed policy, if I'm honest. I've made no bones about this. I've been saying it the whole time, where even if it succeeds, even if miraculously you get it through Parliament, you end up just with maybe 200 people at vast expense being sent to Rwanda, and if they have a legitimate asylum case, we leave them there. None of this makes any sense to me. And I'm curious. I mean, Philip Johnston in the Telegraph said why Mr. Sunak decided to pin his entire premiership to the removal of a few hundred at most migrants to Rwanda will have historians scratching their heads in perplexity. And I agree with it. Why is this the hill you want to die on? Why is there not a better way to do this?
Okay, there's lots of that. Well, one is we've been through lots of other things as well. It's not the only thing I'm working on, but it's a really important one because it's a matter of fairness, first and foremost, because I think actually people coming here illegally undermine the sense of fairness on which our country
We can all
is
agree
built,
on that.
right? So then you say, what do we do about it? Well, Rwanda is one part of a plan, as you said. We've already got the numbers down by a third, which has never happened before, right? So that is progress.
Yeah, you would have been sitting here and saying to me, look at that. And I would have gone, well done.
Yeah. So on Rwanda, why do you need it? Because you need a deterrent. Because simply, if someone comes here illegally, they shouldn't be allowed to stay. We must be able to remove them. And they can't all go back to the country they came from because it's very clearly not safe or a war zone, but you need to have a safe alternative to send them. And that's why you need a policy like Rwanda. And I believe that when we get it up and running, when we get flights going off, and it's uncapped so we can send lots of people there, then people will stop coming. And you know why I know that that's going to work? It's because, as you acknowledged, it's worked with Albania.
If I said to you, I'll bet you £1,000 to a refugee charity you don't get anybody on those planes before the election, will you take that bet?
Well, I want to get the people on the planes, right? Of course I want to get the people on the planes.
£1,000.
Right, I want to get the people on the planes. I'm working incredibly hard to get the people on the planes.
Do you think that should be the priority when at the same time the ONS just predicted we could hit 73 million people who in this country right, coming in not on boats, but coming in the normal
So-
immigration system by 2036.
So hang on, there's
'Cause
lots-
both people go, well, that seems massively more problematic to me.
People talk to me a lot about illegal migration, as I'm sure they talk to you about you. It's important that we grip it, and Rwanda is one part of an overall plan that is working. And you say you're scratching your head. Albania is an example of why it's working. We created a new returns agreement with Albania.
Yeah.
It meant that if people came here illegally, we could send them back, and you know what? They stopped coming. And Rwanda will do the same thing for us.
I do not think it's going to work for you.
Okay, well, we'll have to
That's
agree to disagree.
That's my grim prediction.
But you don't have an alternative way to solve that problem then?
No, I'm not Prime Minister.
Right. So,
and nor do the Labour Party, by the way.
No, nobody does, right?
No.
And if you don't believe in solving the problem, that's one thing. I do. I think the British people do.
I'll
and
give
if you do, you
on
need
that
to
fifth
have
pledge.
a scheme
I'm going
like
to give you a half pass.
Right.
Okay.
And on legal migration, we've taken action. We're going to cut the numbers by about 300,000, more than anyone's ever done before. That kicked in at the beginning of this year, and it will start making a difference.
Final question. You've lasted longer than a lettuce. Congratulations. Labour are 20 points ahead. When are you going to call the election? When are you going to go to the people and test their confidence in you?
Look, I spoke about that at the beginning of this year, so I haven't got more to add on it. But the choice at that election is what matters. And the choice, I think, is becoming increasingly clear. Because if you stick with the plan that is working, of course, as we've been through, we have to make more progress. But the plan is working. We are making progress. The alternative is Labour Party and Keir Starmer, who would just take us back to square one. Because as you know, he's had 4 years. He can't tell you what he would do differently because he doesn't have a plan.
Here's what I say at the end, is that Keir Starmer has resolutely not delivered on his pledges to do an interview with me for Piers Morgan Uncensored. You've now done 2 in the space of the last year. I appreciate that. I think you do put yourself up to be held to account more than he does. If he's watching this, Sakir, you know where to find me. But I do. You said you would get me back a year later. You have done. I appreciate your time, and I wish you, whatever success you deserve this year, Prime Minister.
Well, I appreciate that, and it's good to have the
that
opportunity
remains
to
to
go
be
over
seen,
it.
doesn't it?
Well, actually, as I said, I think we are pointing in the right direction.
You're still going to be here in a year's time?
I plan on being so.
So
you'll come back for that 3rd interview.
We'll do the post-election
there we
interview
go.
back in this room
Back
in a
this
year.
room.
Deal?
Right, done. Deal.
Good to see you.
You too.
We're here.
Thanks for joining us.
You're with TalkTV, on radio,
online.
You're on your smart speaker.
Criminals using XL bully dogs as weapons to threaten others.
No matter how well trained, most dog owners will tell you a dog can turn.
Do you know what I love about Talk Today? We do it all. Sunak, Suella, scones. A woman can become a man and a man can become a woman. And if you think that, you're certifiably